Hey guys, welcome to On the Stack. This is episode 1. We are just talking about formats for beginners. Hope you guys enjoy. By the way, guys, we do have an Instagram. It is On the Stack MPG. I will be posting things about when podcasts go live and like if we're going to go do some fun events or stuff like that. Yeah. Anyways, so today's topic is like what's our like favorite formats, player bases that go with that format, and why we believe it this way. Also, how to choose a format when you're first getting started, and those kind of things. And I think, honestly, Luke, I think you have a lot of experience with this, just because of the fact that you did come in when I already had a set format, and you're like, okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
I feel like a lot of new players go for like standard because you can just buy booster packs at like a Walmart, and they have the pre-built decks which are in standard.
Mhm.
Although standard is like the special format.
Both Luke and I are anti-standard people. We just think it's pretty much a money pit sometimes. If you truly enjoy it and want to go play, go play. Like it's a blast. It's definitely a slower format. You're talking to people that play a lot of Modern and Storm and all these fun combo decks. The thing is that like MTG Arena or Magic the Gathering Arena is amazing to get started. It's standard. It's standard, which makes it really easy for you to get started and understand the format. And it's not as much as a money pit. It doesn't actually require any money to play. And it's a great way to get introed into the game and learn how to play or what the game's about. That's most of our thoughts on standard. I haven't played a lot of standard. I do like some of the standard format stuff. I really like the Sultai mid-range deck that's floating around right now.
That one looks fun.
Yeah, it's using Euro and just kind of like value towning their opponents out of the game.
I think standard. The one thing I really enjoy about standard is the rotating format. Like,
yeah,
it really does force creativity and change in the format, and like, it is always evolving and changing. Where you have other formats, say like older formats, even modern for a while was pretty like there was like 12 decks.
Yeah.
And everybody played variations of those decks. I mean, now with new cards coming in, things are changing and stuff like that.
And also
but
the ban.
The
ban at
yeah,
Opal.
the bans.
Yeah, that affects a lot of things. There goes Affinity.
It's fine. We don't need Affinity.
But
we just gotta get rid of Tron. It'll be fine.
So I guess this is where we start. Like, Luke? What is your favorite format and why? Why do you choose the format that you do choose?
So currently I'm in Pioneer. I was in Modern, and I've kind of rotated the Pioneer, and I'll probably rotate back and forth between those two. The reason I we'll start with Pioneer.
Yeah.
When Pioneer came out, what was it, like 3 months ago? It was a while
little bit
ago.
Longer that, like 6 months, maybe somewhere in there. I don't know.
There was so much hype around it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people started playing it, and it's not a bad format. It's slower than Modern, it's really nice. I would say that's nicer for a newer player because it's a good medium price range wise for decks, and I think it helps. It's slower because it's not like, I won the game turn 3, have a nice day. It's more like, I have several turns to do things and understand what's going on.
Well, it's not that much anymore, and that's why it's dying.
Yeah.
It's definitely the Inverter of Truth combo, which basically just exiles your library, pays Fish or Thassa's Oracle, and wins the game. These are all new cards. You guys can just look them up. I'll probably display them on the screen during the podcast so you guys know what we're talking about. But so
What about you?
I don't really have a favorite format, just to start that conversation. I play everything for the most part. I even go all the way down to Historic, which is the Magic Arena specific format, which is cool. It's a fun format. It's definitely interesting. But like I'm a huge fan of Vintage. I play Vintage online all the time. Um, I love Legacy. High Tide and Death and Taxes are my babies. They are some of my favorite decks of all time. Um, I love Pauper too, even though that it's more.
Popper's fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I actually consider that to be better than, say, Pioneer in the new player standpoint. Because first of all, the decks are like $50.
That's
Second
true.
of
I will
all,
say that.
they have the power level that you get used to playing at such a power level that allows you to understand how to brainstorm and how to use cantrips and all these fancy terms that I'm throwing out there. But um, yeah, personally, I play a lot of Modern because that's what's played around me. I played Pioneer for a while. Uh, my favorite deck of Pioneer was Locust Breach, which is a combo deck. It's one of the reasons that the format's dying because it's such a powerful deck. But yeah,
Just add Garen back in. It'll fix everything, right?
yeah, just ban fish. Just ban Thassa's Oracle so that we can like actually like move on with the format. But like, yeah, those are my favorite formats. I think that we probably should just run down and actually describe what each format is. Because we're selling these names out and it's like, okay, what is this format? What's the difference between the previous format and so on and so forth. So Standard, as we talked about, it's a rotating format, right?
Everything in the last 2 years? Is that how it works?
Everything, kinda. It's usually based around
sets.
it's usually based around core sets and that kind of stuff. It's interesting. All you have to do if you really want to know what sets are in Standard, just search Standard legal sets right now. They'll give you a list. Standard is definitely only newer cards, so you get to see all the new stuff. You don't get to see the crazy busted old stuff. Yeah.
I think.
Anything else about Standard?
I think what's best about Standard is you can do other formats with it. So
yeah.
Draft. I mean, Draft isn't really a format, but it is a play style. And so if you really, really like Draft, you can draft a whole bunch of the most recent sets and then sell those to Standard players or use it in your own decks.
Well, to recommend something, drafting is probably the easiest way to get started into Magic. You show up with nothing and you get to sit down and play. You just show up with $15. That's pretty standard for draft stuff. But draft is technically a format. It's just not a constructed format. Well, just to get into that, the difference between a constructed and a non-constructed format is draft, you build your deck during the actual tournament time. And you only have a limited card pool. Where Standard, you build your deck before, or any of the constructed formats, you build your deck before and then show up with a deck to play. Usually when you start getting into competitive stuff, you try to optimize it, so on and so forth. The one thing that I actually really, really have a hard time with Standard is that it's that the cards don't hold value really easily.
Mhm.
You lose a lot of money unless you're really, really good at playing. And you can grind out games and make money that way. But for the most part, it's a difficult format. To those
unless you're playing online.
Yes, unless you're playing on Arena. That one's, I would recommend picking up Arena Standard. It's a lot of fun. It's super easy. Throw some cards together, see what comes up, try again. Yeah, pretty straightforward. Pioneer. What is Pioneer? I don't know if you know the definition or the legalization of Pioneer.
Everything before Ravnica Alliance Forward?
No, Return to Ravnica Forward.
Return to Ravnica.
So it's everything that when I started playing Magic. From the time I started playing Magic till now, that's legal. There is a ban list. Yeah, I don't know how many cards are on the ban list. I think it's pretty small.
I think they should add more.
Fair enough.
I think it would be an interesting format. I think it'd be fascinating if they banned like Shocklands. So Shocklands, if you don't know, you can play it turn one, and it's a dual colored land, which is really nice, and you pay 2 life, and then you can tap it for either color. If you got rid of those, I think it'd be fascinating to see what the format would then become. It would be
Yeah.
really slow, but I think it'd be also really interesting.
I
because
think it would just be going into historic, but historic right now has the Shocklands, which makes it really worthwhile. I think the reason that it's actually as slow is because in Cards of Tartare they did replant some of the fetch lands. Fetch lands are these lands that you can tap and sack, pay 1 life, go search for the Shocklands. I think the Shocklands are fine. I agree with them that they should have banned the fetching part of it because fetching just allows you to play a lot more greedier mana bases. They allow for some really weird shenanigans. Fetch lands are busted with the delve mechanic. But the funny thing is, some of these things that are on the ban list are like these. It's funny to see how many big value engines are on the ban list. Field of the Dead, which is just a win con in a land.
Oh yeah.
Nexus of Fate is banned. Nexus of Fate is to take an extra turn spell that shuffles back into your library. We can all understand why that's banned. It's an instant speed take an extra turn spell.
I think the ban list is actually pretty good. I'll have to give. I think the problem is what happened with Pioneer. Pioneer came out in like, I would almost say the worst possible time for it to come out.
Yeah.
Because you had Garen and you had Field of the Dead and you had Golden Goose, and all of those were like crazy, really good cards that were in Standard, and everybody's like, well, they just got banned in Standard, we'll just play them in Pioneer.
Yeah, Oko and Golos and Field of the Dead and yeah, all of those guys. But right now, I think the biggest problem with Pioneer is that the new sets that have came out, there's some really busted cards. There's cards that are being banned in Legacy, and we'll get to defining what Legacy is, but Thassa's Oracle is stupid for Pioneer. It's an ETB that when it enters, I can win the game if I have no cards in my library, kind of thing. And oh, you have a removal spell? Cool, I still win because of the way the stack works.
Yeah.
It's kind of gross. But that's kind of our thoughts on Pioneer. I think it's a really good format. I think it's a lot of fun. It has some really interesting interactions. Just be warned, it's a very combo-heavy format. We'll go ahead and go on to the next format, Modern. I think this is one of Luke's favorite formats.
I like Modern.
Yeah.
It's expensive, though.
It's expensive for a college student. Yes, I would agree with this statement. But in the long run,
the farther you get into formats, the more expensive they get.
Fair enough. Yeah, that is very true. The thing is my one thing about Modern, unlike Standard or Pioneer, is that the cards don't lose value as fast. They also gain value a lot easier. The $40 card that you picked up today will be $40 in 2 years or more on a regular basis, unless it gets banned or whatever. But that's basically where I'm thinking. And also, like, a lot of the Modern staples allow you to go into the older formats that if you want to.
Modern's, I think Modern's in a good place, right? It's doing better. It wasn't doing very good, like, earlier this year. I think it's doing a lot better with some of the newer sets coming out and people kind of getting back into playing at it. And I do like, you're so right with the value of cards. Because that's a big thing when you invest, like, say, $500 in a deck, or a lot of these higher end decks like Death Shadow. What is Death Shadow, like $2,000?
It's not that much. It's like I think 1,100 or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. But you can buy those cards and then you can play it for like 6 months and then trade to a different deck, because you don't have to worry about the cost like plummeting and you not having any value. Where like Standard, the second your cards rotate out of that format, if they're not super high value, great cards that everybody's already using, you just lost what? $50 in card? Yeah, a lot.
$200. Yeah, and as the idea of a new player, that doesn't sound very fun. You invested $200 something to get more competitive in this format, and then oh, things rotated, and now I don't get to play with those cards anymore because of the format I play, and also they all lose value. Awesome. Whereas Modern and Pioneer all allow us to use these really cool cards that have been printed. I believe Modern is from 8th edition forward, which is a big card pool. There's a lot of cards. Also, if you just enjoy playing faster decks, I will tell you that this is a faster format. It is a turn 3, turn 4 format, which what that means is that games are decided on turn 3, turn 4. But the one thing I got to say about that is that just because it's on turn 3, turn 4 doesn't mean it's still the same length of game. It's just because it's less of land go, land go, land go. It's much more, okay, I have a 1-drop, I have a 2-drop, I have a 3-drop, and I'm going to curve out, right?
Yeah, there's a much nicer curve. I will say that about Modern. I really, really liked the pacing of it. It's very fast, but it also feels really, really nice to be able to have a 1-drop and be able to do something on your turn every turn.
Yeah. And decks are ideally built that way. Also, the cool thing is that it's not overrun by combo decks. A lot of people are like, well, Modern's where all the combo players go. Yes, you're not wrong. You're not wrong in that assumption. Combo players love Modern in older formats because they get to deal with all these cool card interactions. But there's also, because of the age of cards and that kind of stuff, there's also enough cards that we get things like Bant Snowblade or Tron, which awesome deck, but they're control decks at heart. A mono green control deck that goes cool. I'm gonna count mana this way: 1, 2, 7.
It's so true. I have a love-hate relationship with Tron because it's like, oh, it's such a cool deck idea. There's so many things you can do with it, and then you play against it, and you're like, I hate this. This feels like I'm being like obliterated.
Yeah, by these big colorless control cards. But like one of the best decks in the format right now is called Jund. Jund is black, red, green. It's a tricolored deck, and all it is a mid-range deck. All it's trying to do is outvalue its opponent with cards that look at your opponent's hand, steal cards, removal spells, and this big nice creature called Termagües. I will show a picture when this goes live. Yeah. Any other comments about Modern, just as a nutshell?
It gets expensive.
I
would say for new players, you can. I think the first deck we built for me for Modern was a super cheap deck. I think it was $120, and it was just white weenies. It was a ton to play, super fun to play. But if you really, really want to be able to compete with other people, I think a starting price for a deck where you can actually win tournaments is probably like $250, and then it goes up from there.
Well, one of the top decks right now is called Mono Red Blitz. It is currently $178 for the whole build, which surprisingly really cheap.
That's really cheap.
Yeah, it is a Mono Red aggro deck. Okay.
That's why. That's why. Okay.
You have to remember that, like, a lot of these cards, I would definitely, if you're just getting into Modern and you want to see what it's like, definitely pick this deck up. You probably have a lot of the pieces, especially if you played other formats. You definitely have Light Up the Stage. You definitely have like all these pieces that just went through Standard. And the pieces that you are going to buy that are more expensive, say Manamorphose, Lightning Strike, Lava Strike. Lightning Bolt's super cheap right now, but you will play it in almost any of the red decks in Modern. Manamorphose, you can transition into Storm, Phoenix decks. There's all sorts of things you can transform into. But I think Modern is the first place that we really get to learn what sideboarding is, why sideboarding is so important. The earlier format, sideboarding's cool, sideboarding's good, it helps win games, but you can win a tournament without a sideboard. Where in Modern, I don't know if that's necessarily possible as much. I'm sure people have done it when your deck's super powerful and you're at the top of the table and so on and so forth. But when it comes to mirror matches and like, oh, I'm facing against a combo deck that wins on turn 3 consistently. How do I stop them? Kind of thing, and that's where the sideboard comes in. I find so much enjoyment at playing at a higher format. Because
there's a level of intelligence that it then takes. It's no longer about, oh, I have this great card that I can play whenever I want and wins the game. It's more like, all right, I have a whole bunch of great cards. I have to choose one of them to play at the right time, and if I don't,
my opponent will have a great card that outvalues mine, and that's how it goes. But also, Modern is like the first place where you see it a lot in Pioneer, but Pioneer is just combo deck versus combo deck. Modern is the first place that you really get to see, like, how do you counter a combo deck? Like, what makes a mid-range deck powerful enough to counter someone that can win on turn 3 consistently? What gives these combo decks this challenge? And as I'm gonna call myself out right now, I'm a combo player. I'm a filthy combo player.
The dirtiest.
But the thing is that it's like, that's where I find my enjoyment. I don't want to do combo deck versus combo deck over and over because of the fact that, yeah, then we're just racing to see who wins. And then it turns into what's called a goldfish game, where each person's just doing their thing, you don't interact with each other, any of that. Modern, I believe, is one of the first places that you really get to see tons of interaction against each other.
If you watch like a YouTube video of someone playing Modern and someone playing like Pioneer, you will notice there's a lot more interaction between the two players and the battlefield. You're so true about that. You get to the point where it's like, oh, now I have ways to deal with what my opponent's doing, and I am forced to interact with them and not just goldfish my way to victory.
Yeah.
Because if I don't, I lose.
Well, even the combo decks have interaction. Like, combo decks are still running counter spells so that they can protect themselves if something goes wrong, right? Like, well, we can go and go on to the next format. Pauper.
It's amazing.
It is so much fun. It's much more of a casual format. It's only commons, so you would be surprised how powerful these decks get.
It should just be competitive. The only competitive format.
Yeah, totally. I love this format because it's cheaper, and it's also, you get to play with some really, really interesting cards. You get to play with some cards that are banned in other formats because they don't have the other piece that goes with them. So on and so forth.
It's a very creative format, that's for sure, because it forces you to be like, oh, how do I think around this? And also, one thing I really wish with Pauper is that it was more common. Because, like, you'll go to MTG Fridays, right? And you can play, nobody's like, we're having a Pauper competition every Friday. That would be awesome. I do wish it was a more popular format. It's getting there, but it's a lot of fun. I really like that format.
Yeah, there's a lot of stores that are trying to get there, but it's a format that if people are just net decking because it's so cheap, it can get really boring. The cool thing about Pauper is it's all 25, 26, 27 years of Magic or something like that. It's every single card that was ever printed at common. Pauper is probably not something that we're going to talk about too much, just because it's not popular enough.
All right, this has been fun, guys. No, that's true. It's not very popular. I think.
Legacy. This is one of my child's. Legacy is a blast. I just want to know what your opinion on Legacy is, because you haven't played a lot of it. I don't even know if you've actually sat down and played a game of Legacy. I'm sure you've watched us play.
I've watched a lot of people play Legacy, and it's fascinating to watch. I haven't played very much of anything. Very much of it. Sorry, that's bad English. I will say this: it's a fascinating format to watch, and I think to probably play because there's so much interaction and there's so much like, all right, you do this and you do that. It gets expensive though.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You do deal with cards that are on the reserve list, which sucks. Get rid of it, Wizard. # no more reserve list so people play Legacy. And Vintage. But anyways, Legacy, is all 25 years of Magic. You get some pretty weird things. Like you get some turn 1 combo decks. You get some really cool value engine decks. This is probably one of the most popular Delver formats. This is the little transforming 1/1 wizard dude that turns into a 3/2 insect with flying. Yeah, I'll show a picture of Delver. But
yeah, see, I don't have very much experience with Legacy and Vintage.
But yeah, that's pretty much the base of it. The cool thing about Legacy, though, is that you have several decks that can take aspects of other formats and do some really weird things. Vintage. Vintage is the same time frame as Legacy. The only difference is there's no ban list. There's a restricted list, which means that anything on the restricted list you only can run one ofs. So Black Lotus, Pearl, any of the Moxes, Ancestral Visions, Power. Vintage is one of the only formats where we get to play with the Power 9. Yeah, it's much faster than Legacy because you have a bunch of these quote-unquote free lands. You get...
Yeah. I think those, at least Vintage and
Legacy?
Vintage and Legacy are both really interesting formats in the sense of, especially Vintage when it comes to the Power 9.
Mm-hmm.
When you have stuff that's like that expensive and that rare and that powerful, it's very interesting because a lot of people run those in their decks if they want to win. But then there's how do you deal with that? How do I fight with this? Is really it brings, you have to problem solve a lot in it.
Yeah, you have to also understand this is a turn 1, turn 2 format. You win or lose within the first couple turns on a regular basis. But the big thing about these formats is that they are not new player friendly at all.
Yeah, for sure.
I hate to say it, but Vintage and Legacy are not new player friendly. You definitely have to have a good grasp of what the stack is, and we'll probably cover all these things so that if you want to get into these, you will understand some of the pieces. I will definitely be doing episodes where we're talking about Legacy and Vintage and so on and so forth, but I think we're going to probably stick with Modern and Pioneer and those non-rotating formats that are a lot cheaper to get into. Draft. Draft is a big one. And Sealed. I think we need to cover those two. Those are not constructed formats, so we're moving into the limited formats is what they're called. Draft and Sealed. What do you think about them? I don't know if you've played. You've done a little bit of drafting.
I haven't done Sealed. I do enjoy Draft. I think drafting is a really fun format to do with friends.
Yeah, it definitely requires friends. You need people in the group that you know and communicate with, and it's much more of a social. You can't just show up with a deck, play some people, enter a tournament. Definitely, it's the same with Commander. It's definitely has a casualer environment. Unless you get into the
really
higher,
fun about it.
Yeah, unless you get into the higher competitive scenes, because draft is something that is played at GP level.
Well, so what draft is you get 3 booster packs typically, and you open them up and you take one card and then you pass it to the guy next to you and you get his pile and you make a deck out of the booster packs. And so it's a fascinating concept, and it can be a lot of fun. And it's definitely, like we were saying, it's fun to just get some friends together and draft like an old set or even a new set. The unsets, what a lot of people draft. Is they were made to play with drafting.
They just want to have some fun. We're going to draft them, kind of thing. But like drafting as a competitive format, you get to learn a lot of things. It definitely has more of that poker feel to it because you get to look at everyone what they previously had, so you get to kind of determine what they took, and it's just mind game. When you start getting into higher levels, Sealed is you get 6 booster packs, open them up. You don't pass them around. 6 booster packs, open them up, build a deck out of those 6 booster packs. You would be surprised how difficult this is.
That sounds actually way more difficult than drafting.
Well, because in drafting, you get to see a total of 8 times 3, so 27 different packs at different times during the draft. and so you get to pick the colors that you kind of need or are you building into. Whereas sealed is 100% up to luck. I'm not a huge fan of sealed. Sealed isn't really a competitive format. It's much more used for pre-releases and stuff like that, which is when a new set comes out, they'll do sealed events and you get to have some fun and so on and so forth.
I think that's almost all the formats. There's some, like we were saying, there's some smaller ones.
But thanks. I guess we're going to kind of close it here because that's most of the topics that we had for today. Thanks for coming by and listening. Thanks for actually sitting down and listening to our nonsense and making it this far. This is just the perspective of two college students that have played a little bit of Magic and want to show their joy and creativity through a platform that's not just Magic, but talk about it. Leave a comment if you have a question. Leave a comment if you have a comment. Like us and subscribe. Anything else?
See y'all next. Game on and don't die via quarantine.
Yeah. Don't die during quarantine. Magic the Gathering Arena, and also anything like that. Yeah, cool. You guys have an awesome day.